Good morning and welcome to City Talk. It's a weekly radio program. It's a podcast. It's a TV program. It's a way that here at the City of Waco we're able to communicate the great things that are happening and things that people want to know about happening in our area. I'm Larry Holsey, and I'm welcoming today Joe Bobbitt, who is the Chief Appraiser,
Yes, sir.
and Jim Halbert, who is the Deputy Appraiser for the McLennan County Appraisal District, a very popular group this time of the year.
Yes, sir.
Everybody who owns any properties has gotten a notification from you all.
At least for residential so far.
Residential so far, okay. And about the values that are being determined for taxation, and we're going to talk about that process because some people get mad at you guys for raising your taxes, and you don't have anything to do with funds, the taxing amounts and things itself. And we're going to talk about that and better define how the McLennan County Appraisal District, McCAD,
Yes, sir.
chart gets into that. So, Joe, why don't you start off, if you want to, and kind of give us a background history how McCAD, the appraisal district, got involved, because years ago, I think everybody, and I mean schools, cities, everybody had their own appraisals and things, and there's where it was really a crazy house.
Yes, sir. Originally, prior to 1981, each individual taxing entity had their own appraiser, and if you disagreed with the value, you'd have to go to 4 or 5 different entities to argue that value, and they could be wildly different. And then there's the Pivotal bill that was passed in 1979, and that established the appraisal districts. And so now there is one appraisal district that's bound to the county lines. We're not a part of the county, but we're restricted to the county line. And so we are now the sole entity that can appraise property for property tax.
So you come up with one value for a property.
Yes, sir.
I'm just going to say your home.
Yes, sir.
Okay. A lot of people have other properties and stuff, but for your home, that value is then the same for Waco ISD if you live in Waco School District, Midway, or whatever school district it is, MCC, the county, the city. Those are the main 4 taxing entities,
Yes,
I
sir.
believe. I mean, there may be a few others in outlying areas, but this is all of McLennan County that you all cover. A whole lot of property. You have, I'm asking you a question.
125,000
How
property.
many?
125,000 in the county.
A lot of properties.
Yes, sir.
A lot. And does that include commercial?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay.
There's about 12,000 commercial and 11 or 12,000 personal property accounts.
And of course, the valuation is how you arrive at that. We're going to talk about that and how it goes each year. Can go down,
Yes, sir.
but generally does go up because we are living in a very prosperous part of the country.
Yes, sir.
Texas itself is very valuable property, real estate. People are moving here from other states. We know a lot of people are moving to Waco.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of people can point fingers as to why and the successes, but, you know, we just finished having a very successful national men's basketball team right here in Baylor University. That brings people to Waco as well as other things do. So, and when the value of homes goes up, it's probably because people are almost going to be fighting to buy a particular house. And so the asking price can either be set high or many times they're selling for more. Talk a little bit about that.
We don't have direct access to MLS, so we don't get
Multiple
involved.
listing service.
Multiple listing service. Yes, sir.
I'm
That's-
always one about acronyms because everybody.
And so we don't have. We're not in the current sales market, so we don't see what's currently going on. But from what we're hearing, properties are being sold very quickly. There's very few properties that are available to sell, and there's quite a few buyers that are out there. And so people get into either bidding wars or they're making offers before it actually even hits the actual market. And so that just, when there's low supply and high demand, it increases values. And so that's our job, is to reflect that, the historical pattern of what happened in the past year. And so that's what we're currently trying to do, is capture what happened during 2021 or 2020.
How has the pandemic, from that standpoint, impacted values? Have you noticed or heard anything different, or is there anything? How has it changed your industry? I'm going to call it.
It depends on the property type. Initially, we expected the values to drop quite drastically. Residential, it kind of stalled for a couple months. Then everybody realized that COVID wasn't going away, and then everybody started buying houses for different reasons. And then you started seeing the prices, increase drastically. In the commercial world, hotels, entertainment type properties, those have typically suffered. But the commercial valuations are based on an investment period and what would a typical investment person be willing to put into the property. And they realize that COVID is a short-term issue, and so there's a longer holding period for commercial properties. And so even though their 1 year income has suffered greatly, the overall value of the property may not correspond exactly with their loss of income.
Well, I know we've had a lot of new hotels under construction and even begin construction during the pandemic. So it shows a very positive attitude for our economic strength here in the Waco area.
Yes, sir.
And when you have new buildings, and I'm using the Amazon building, for example.
Yes, sir.
That building was already under contract before the pandemic began, maybe, but they're moving forward with rapid haste, as it may be. And all the 2,000 employees and all that's great for our economy. And that's bringing more lives and more heads in beds for sure.
Yes, sir.
On a permanent basis.
Because in theory, that 1,000 or 2,000 people that are going to be working there may not actually originate from Waco, and so you're going to bring in new families that are going to need a place to live. And then if there's already a shortage of housing, then that increases that issue.
One of the main goals I think you all have at McCad is making sure that the values are keeping in touch with what the value truly is, what the sale is, so it can't get out of proportion. I know years ago they were way out of balance. I mean, I'm just going to throw figures out there. A house that would sell maybe on the market for, let's say, $150,000 would maybe valued at $70,000 or something like that. Jim, tell us a little bit about how that kind of thing is and how it's maybe changed and to bring everything into an equal basis so one is the same as the other.
Right. So we have, with our software package that we have, we're able to analyze what properties are currently selling for and then compare that to what our level of appraisal is. So if we look at a neighborhood of properties and we see that overall we're valuing them, say, at 90% of market and we're supposed to be 100, we know in that area we're going to have to raise the values approximately 10% to get to where we need to be.
Okay, and that's again, valuations are accurate and everything. Now, something I learned before we went on the air is the fact that you all are governed, or not governed, but overseen by the state to see how well and how accurate maybe it is that your appraisals are, and that can impact, for example, school districts or stuff like that. Describe that. Somebody help our listeners and viewers get that, because that was an eye-opener to me. I did not know.
So in even number years, our values are audited by the state. And what they're looking at is to see if our values are within 5% of market value. The state has access to MLS, multi-list service, where a lot of CADs don't, but the state still does. So they're using cells that we didn't have access to. We have other sources to get sales information. People supply us sales information. We send out sales surveys, stuff like that. But they use, they check our values against the sales that they have, and if we fall out of that range, then that's when school funding starts to suffer.
We're supposed to be within 5% on the whole for the entire school district. Mm-hmm. And so individual houses, we can be off quite a bit, but on average or the median, we're supposed to be within a 5% plus or minus of what the state comes up with. And so for last year, the 2020 property value study, we failed McGregor. According to the data that we had and the sales that we had, we're at 98% of market. And so we thought we were doing a good job. We weren't trying to overburden the taxpayers by being over 100%. We were trying to just skirt it a little bit. And then the state came in and said we're 7.5% low for the entire school district. When you look at just residential, we're about 11% too low. And so this year, now that we have additional sales, we're having to try to catch up, specifically with McGregor, because we're going to get audited again this current year.
So the state actually comes in and says, you didn't raise the values enough.
Yes, sir.
And so they can almost mandate and say you have to be up to what the value is for that school district. And
yes,
so
sir.
when you said the McGregor School District and it basically failed that test, how does that impact the school district?
The first year you go into grace period, and so the state gives you, I think, 2 years of grace where you can basically try to get it correct without impact on the school finance and funding. But after that 2 year period, if you're still out of tolerance, then the school the state stops funding the school at that amount, and so then And since the school was assuming our number was correct when they set their tax rate, now there's this gap of funding that they'll be missing out on. And so then they'll either have to let teachers go or they have to cut funding for different programs. And so that's one area that we really try not to mess up.
And again, you all have nothing, and you don't have criteria, anything dealing with the tax rate. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, how that is decided by each of the taxing entities. That actually puts the dollar, that amount of tax that a person owes for a property. All y'all are interested in is the value of that property. And then the tax rate is figured per $100 of that evaluation. And we'll talk a little bit more maybe when we get into that. So it's a major deal. Let's talk about how you make the determination, as it is, of raising somebody's rates. I personally have various properties. I have other people who've told me that, oh, this has gone up here or noise and whatever. Various areas and things. What is the driving thing, and what kind of, tell our listeners or viewers what you all use to get that accurate information. Because I know you don't just you don't have multi-list service necessarily, but you are monitoring different things, and you never go inside a property.
Not unless they request it.
Okay.
So that's rarely happens, but sometimes people will ask us to come inside if there is something that we're not aware of.
Okay. Talk about how you kind of make those determinations.
We start with a cost approach, and so we're trying to estimate how much it would cost to replace that house, kind of like what an insurance company does. And then we determine the depreciation, so the amount of wear and tear that the property has accrued due to the age and the condition of the property. And so that way we're trying to determine what it would be close to selling for based on just the current condition. We also have aerial photography where we can look at the top of the house and see if anything's been added, any new structures. Once we come up with our initial value, then we'll go back and look at any sales that we do have and see how far off we are. And so like Jim was talking about, if properties that are selling are showing that $100,000 and we have it appraised at 90, then we have to raise that, 11% just to get to 100,000. And so we do that to the entire median for that neighborhood. And what we consider a neighborhood doesn't mean what everybody else may consider a neighborhood, because what we're looking at is what would be a competitive market for a house. And so it's when a buyer comes in looking at houses, it may not be everything on the street, because there could be a range of sizes and prices. So those may not be direct competitors.
A lot of those things are impacted. So, just the way other properties look, the way the values are, but a whole lot of based on sales, because sales is probably the most determining factor as far as what people are willing to pay for a property.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, you get into a block, or your neighborhood, a street, as you may call it, or an area, a community, maybe like even a neighborhood association with the city encourages people to be part of. You get in there and you see that there are certain properties that are really hot right now for whatever reason. A lot of the older properties people want to fix up, and that compared to the years ago, it was you wanted to go to different areas, newer homes and things like that. But now fixing up older homes,
yes, sir,
and that's probably where a lot of the your protests, as we'll talk about in a moment, come from. The fact that this property has forever been this age. Why is it going up?
It's usually not
people buying them.
Yes, sir. And usually when the value goes up, it's not what you as the homeowner did. Usually, it could be if you added on a garage or something else, then we'll catch that and your value will go up. But most of the time, it's due to what did your neighbors do? What did they do when they sold their property? That's usually what drives the increases in the value. The other issue that when people do come into the ARV and they get the value reduced, it takes the place of our value, but our underlying calculation is still there. And so after 2 years, when that ARV number goes away, now we're basically catching up for 2 years when it didn't change. And then so they see a large change when it comes off of the ARV. So that kind of surprises people.
ARV is?
The Appraisal Review Board.
Okay, that's the volunteers we'll talk about in a minute.
Yes, sir.
It's not connected with anybody that's a paid staff or anything about that. Those are citizens who own properties themselves.
Yes, sir.
And we'll talk about that, too, in a little bit. He just joined us for visiting with Joe Bobbitt, who is the chief appraiser, and Jim Halbert, who is the deputy appraiser for the McLennan County Appraisal District, who is taxed, and I don't mean it from a taxing agency, but charged, should I say, with coming up with a value that is the most accurate value of what your property should be worth. that if it were to be sold, and a lot of people always say, well, go ahead and give me that money for my house. Of course, they don't want to sell their house.
Yes, sir.
I hear that kind of thing. That's what it's worth, but you don't want to sell your house. And Joe, you mentioned before I took this break the fact that I always hate to see a for sale sign go up anywhere in my neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
That just knows that, oh no, now somebody's going to buy that house for more, and my value is going to be raised.
Yes, sir.
But justifiably it should be, because if I decided to sell my house the next week, the month, the year, or something like that, it should be able to generate a better income. Okay, there is a protesting part of this process that in the evaluation and the notification that was received by anybody, it tells them that they have until, what is it, May 17th?
May 17th.
To file a protest. Talk about the different methods of protesting, how somebody should apply for that, and what they can expect maybe the process to be like.
Sure. So what we encourage people to do is use our e-file system. They're able to go online, create an account, and then file a protest from there. They can submit or upload any evidence as to why they feel the value is not right and should be lowered. The appraisers are able to see that information and review sales that we may have in the area, compare that to what's going on with the property, and actually send the owner an offer through the e-file system, and the owner can accept that, or if they choose to not accept it, continue on with their hearing. That's the easiest way. Right now, the office is still closed to the public. We have the lobby open, and people are able to come in and talk to a person in the lobby, but not the appraisers, and we're not allowing the general public beyond the front desk. Due to size restraints within the office, we can't, the social distancing aspect. So that's why we're encouraging people to use the e-file. However, if people don't have access to a computer, they can still mail in a protest or bring it to the office and drop it off at the front counter. And then, at least for residential, the appraisers are trying to review every protest that's filed and reach out to the owner to see if a settlement can be reached without having to continue the appraiser review board.
Okay. But then the process can be continued from that point if you don't agree with the offer that is returned by the appraiser from the electronic process. And then you're established, and then you are given an opportunity to go before a group of, is there 3 of them typically? Or?
Usually the panel's 3 to 4.
Yeah, and these are volunteer citizens who give of their time. They maybe have background in the real estate or something, but they're just people.
Yes, sir.
They're citizens who are trying to give a fair appraisal, adjudication as it may be of the process, and make sure that your all's recommendation as it may be has justification, as do maybe the property owners. And so I've gone through the process several times, and I compliment you all very much. I mean, certainly I was in disagreement with it, but sometimes you have to agree to disagree. But the value was realistic after I ended up with it, and it was worth the effort. And there was an error that was kind of, that I was able to prove. But and so anyway, the appraisal review board meets, and you're giving a specific date and time. Is that going to still happen in person this year, or what?
Starting out, they will be through teleconference. As we move forward, then we'll have some time for in-person if people prefer to come in person in front of the board.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm feeling like, and we've talked on this program before, that hopefully with the vaccinations and the reduction of the number of cases, the herd immunity, and all the things we've talked about wanting to get to are getting closer and closer. But the time to submit these protests, as it may be, I hate to use the word protest, it seems so, but that's bottom line what it is. I'm protesting what I feel like my property is worth, maybe, if I'm doing this process. And this is all available online. And the deadline to file that is May 17th. And its instructions came with and I'm going to say it, me too, because I have one property I'm going to protest. But, and I don't get any privileges from you guys because you're not involved in any of that, because the appraisal district handles that in a very fair and equitable manner. And I'm really, again, complimentary of the way that's been set up, because you all are overseen by the state,
yes, sir,
first of all, but you have no connection with the city of Waco, the school districts, the county, all the other taxing entities, other than providing them with a total value of the various properties, and then they use those.
Yes, sir. They use our total value to determine they divide their budget by our value to determine the tax rate. And so it's kind of like two separate hands that, you know, we don't work in coordination with each other. A lot of people assume, because we hear a lot of comments that we work with the city or the county to increase values and increase taxes. And I've never had any entity reach out to me and say we need to increase the value so we can get our taxes up.
Yeah.
If anything, I've had schools ask, do we really need to go up that much?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I know there have been agencies who have reduced their tax rate.
Yes, sir.
Because they knew the valuations were going up. And they start talking about things, and it gets very complicated, the effective rate and some of those other things that bottom line is how much money is brought in to the city of Waco, for example, based on this property. You may pay more to the city of Waco because the value went up, even though the rate has really been the same for 8 or 10 or 15 years. I don't know, it's a long time. But that's the whole process. Now, you mentioned before we went on the air, there's the new exemption, or maybe something that you can do because of the cold weather event that happened. And talk about that.
The legislature at the last session passed a temporary disaster exemption, and it's for natural disasters. So COVID didn't apply, because it was an economic disaster. But for natural disasters, like in Winter Storm Uri was declared a natural disaster by the governor. You have until May 28th to apply for the exemption. The form is on our website at the very top, and even the calculation and stuff, how to determine it. But you have to have at least 15% damage to your property, to the actual the structures of the property. The land doesn't really, it's hard to damage land. And so you have to apply, have 15% damage to the property, bring us documentation to show that, and then we'll apply the exemption. If it gets denied for whatever reason, if you don't meet that 15% threshold, then we'll deny it. But then you can still protest that denial and take that to their appraisal review board and have them reconsider it. So.
Now, when you talk about exemptions and things like that, but, you know, people have homestead exemptions, stuff like that. You all really don't get into any of that because, again, you're giving a value for a property, correct?
We do both. We do values, but we also apply all the exemptions.
Okay.
And so...
I know on my tax statement there's always the exemption, but I didn't know who applied that.
Yes, sir. We're the office that handles the exemptions and tax deferrals, or at least we put them on there, and the tax office handles the collection part of it. But with the homestead exemption, you have to apply once, and then you're not required to reapply. In the past, we'd have people reapply every 5 years just to make sure you still live there, you hadn't turned into rental. We've stopped that. We found a new service that can handle that for us. Disabled veteran exemptions are available. Disabled person exemptions, those are the most common. And over 65, if we know your age, we'll automatically apply the over 65.
And you don't have to ask for it for each entity. It automatically applies to whatever's available.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit how, again, these values are provided to all the different taxing entities.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to say in Waco, for example, inside the city limits, you're a member of, you're going to contribute, you're going to pay taxes to one of probably 6 or 8 school districts.
Yes, sir.
You may not be in the Waco ISD. You may be in the city limits. I mean, you're paying McGregor taxes.
Yes, sir.
Because there are some people that live in the city of Waco that pay Lorena, or of course, Connolly, La Vega, Midway, all those other school districts are in there. Each one of them and their school boards, our city councils, all set the tax rate.
Yes, sir.
Okay? So the city of Waco, for example, is now under the process of developing our budget, kind of estimating kind of what we guesstimate, I guess it is, the tax will be. And we won't know that until you all provide the final valuation roll. What is it, July 30th?
July 25th. We have to certify the roll.
Okay, that's a certified roll that is provided to all of the taxing agencies, school districts and everybody. And then from there, their school boards, their city councils and whatever, their boards will then say, okay, this total number of dollars, and I'm going to use one house, for example. This one house is $200,000. And of that, we apply the tax rate that we currently have, and they make the decision, can they work within the budget that they are having to come up with, and they either raise or lower or keep it the same based on that. And so it wasn't back in the 70s when everyone did their own appraisals.
Yes, sir.
You're able to, everybody's the same on that part of it, but then they apply the tax rate. That tax rate varies. School districts
yes,
are maybe like $1.50 per $100 value, and that may be a little bit high. I know City of Waco is in the 70-cent range per $100 valuation. Some of the other cities are less than that because they don't have a lot of the things that City of Waco does. You know, they don't have an airport and a convention center and a zoo and some of the other bigger things that our citizens have to bear the weight of. Something.
Yes, sir.
So that's talk a little bit about that and how you all are out of that business completely. You've already mentioned that, but it's very critical that everybody understands the fact that you all are not the bad guys that have anything to do with the tax money that paid.
Yes, sir. We don't collect. Randy Riggs' office is the tax collector, but he probably even has even less say in any of this. He takes our value and the entity's tax rate to come up with the amount that he's going to collect. But each entity, they set their own budget, and then based on their budget amount, they use our total taxable value to determine what their tax rate could or should be. But the state also has limits on how much they can go up from one year to the next. I think they put a 3.5% or 2.5% increase limit. Used to is 8%, so entities could go up automatically 8% every year. And so now they're limited to a smaller amount to try to ease the burden on the taxpayers. That way it's just not ever increasing 8%. But each entity has to go through that on their own process. And if they go above the state mandated minimum, then they have to go through an election. On August 7th, we should send out a postcard that'll have all the tax rates and estimated proposed taxes. So we have a website called McLennan.truthandtaxation.com, and that'll have all the fund tax information and what's being proposed by the entities.
And you all send that?
We send out the postcard. It doesn't say anything about McLennan County Appraisal District on it because the state didn't say it had to. It said put the tax assessor's collector website on there and his contact information. So
sure.
We send out the postcard, but it has everybody else's contact info.
Okay. So you're not necessarily putting the tax rate on there, just the contact information.
It has the tax rate on the card. It has the contact info, but on the website it'll have every taxing entity. You can look up your specific property and see every taxing entity that you fall under, and then what their the current rate, the proposed rate, and the no new revenue rate.
Yeah.
And so you can see all these and what the actual dollar amount for the taxes would be.
And again, the rate that you're talking about and that we're talking about here is the rate per $100 of valuation. So you're going to have to get your math going here, use your calculator, use your computer, and divide $100 into the value of your property. $200,000, guess what? We know what it's going to be.
Yes, sir. But it will show you the total dollar amount in a nice little pie chart, and so you can see the different rates and what the total effect on your wallet would be.
And we have City of Waco, for example. If you're City of Waco, you have City of Waco, the school district, MCC, the county.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's all.
That's the four that you'll typically always have.
Yeah.
You could also get into TIFs and PIDs and reinvestment zones.
Each one of those, is their own rate.
Yes, sir.
And variable and all that kind of stuff. But add all that up, and that's per $100 valuation, and divide that into the value of your property and go from there.
Yes, sir.
All right, we got about a minute left. I want to make sure everybody knows that if you have any question of this, you can go to the website. And what is the website address?
McLennancad.org.
Okay, and that's on your the documentation that you got on your properties, and it tells you how to file a protest electronically, like Jim talked about, which is the first process to get it going. And I will be doing that and get it going that way. And again, I want to compliment you all for the agency that you all have and in control. How many employees do you have working?
41.
41. There's a lot of people doing the thing, doing the eyes on, maybe the aerial shots, drive-bys, and whatever. Nobody goes in. And to get the valuation of what realistically is the true value of your home at that time.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Joe Bobbitt, who is the chief appraiser, and Jim Halbert, who is the deputy appraiser for the McLennan County Appraisal District, a very big agency, an important agency that's not popular right now.
No, sir.
Just due to whatever it is, we know that's part of it, but it's aiming to be accurate as far as evaluation of what your property should be able to be sold for. Guys, I really want to appreciate all the hard work that you all do and your staff and what you have to go through to come up with this. And year round, you have to work on this to keep it going because it's constantly changing, and work within the state regulations that you outlined earlier in the program. Thank you for all that, and thanks for being with us this morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us.
And I want to thank all of you all for watching and listening to us today on City Talk, and hope you'll join us again next week. This program is produced by the Municipal Information Department of the City of Waco and is provided as a public service by this station. Always hit fade to black first. Good job.